Today we're going to be exploring how to capture stunning sunburst photos using a Sony Mirrorless camera. Firstly, let's talk about the ideal time for taking sunburst photos. You want to shoot when the sun is low in the sky, typically during sunrise or sunset. This will give you the most perfect angle and create the beautiful sunburst effect. Now let's talk about positioning. Position yourself when the sun is partially obscured by an object. It could be a tree, building, or even a person. This will make the rays of the sunburst more pronounced. In these photos, I shot it right when the sun is peeking out behind a rock or in between the tree branches or through the clouds. Next, let's set up your camera. On your Sony camera, you'll want to set your aperture at a high f number, around f16 or higher. A smaller aperture or larger f number creates longer and more pronounced rays, while a larger aperture or smaller f number creates a shorter and less pronounced rays. This is because a smaller aperture forces more light to diffract or spread out, creating the sunburst effect. I typically like to shoot between f16 to f22. So the next step is you will want to use manual focus on your lens. You want to focus manually on an area 1/3 into the scene to ensure both the foreground and the sunburst are in focus. Depending on the light conditions, you may want to adjust your shutter speed and ISO. If it's too bright, increase the shutter speed. If it's too dark, increase the ISO. But remember, a higher ISO can introduce noise into your image. I typically recommend using a tripod to allow you to shoot at a lower shutter speed and ISO to get the sharpest and cleanest image. Also, the aperture blades of the lens play a significant role in determining the shape and quality of the sunburst photos. The number of aperture blades in your lens determines the number of rays in your sunburst. The shape of the aperture blades also affect the quality of the sunburst. Rounded aperture blades create a softer and less defined sunburst, while straight edge aperture blades create a sharper and more defined sunburst. I personally like the look of the Sony 16-35 f2.8 GM2, and since this lens has 22 aperture blades, I really like how the sunburst looks in this lens. So another tip that I have is to underexpose your image by 1 to 2 stops, especially when you're shooting landscape, just because the sun is going to be overexposed typically if you expose for the foreground. If you're in aperture priority mode, underexposing it by 1 or 2 stops. This will allow you to capture most of the sky details in the highlights, and during post you can always bring up the details from the darks. And finally, don't forget the post-processing side. Some minor adjustments like contrast, brightness, and color enhancement can really make your sunburst pop. And there you have it. That's how you capture stunning sunburst photos using your Sony Mirrorless camera. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell for more photography and videography tutorials.